All right, raise your hand if this is your very first in-person industry event since the pandemic. Oh, okay, so quite a bit of you. Let's see if this is your very first time with us at GlobalSaké, a GlobalSaké event, virtual or physical? Virtual or physical? Okay, fewer. Okay, we have Sam. Great. So we're very happy to have this, to do this in person again here. A little bit about GlobalSaké. So we're a community of global. So I believe that, you know, when people come together across functions, cultures, countries, that's when real innovation can happen. You know, that's when you can really solve for big global problems, integrating the complementing skill sets, the diverse perspectives. And this is what GlobalSaké is about. It's really, it's the human asset, is you guys bringing people together. We have, last year we went all virtual. So we have now 1,300 global leads across the planet, really. Last year, because it was all fully virtual, we had folks coming out of Africa and Asia and Europe, expanding on our US, across America's audiences. And this is our very first event this year. The last one was a minute before the pandemic started, February 2020. So very happy to be here. I'm going to give it to Ted to say welcoming words, and then I'll continue.
Good evening. My name is Ted Ladd, and I am the Dean of the San Francisco campus for the Hult International Business School. So we are, yeah, we got some students here too. So we're delighted to have you here. Let me explain otherwise what goes on in this building. Hult has, it's the 15th best business school in the world. And we're the only business school that has campuses in San Francisco, Boston, New York, London, Shanghai, and Dubai. Our students, typically, postgrad students, do a one-year program. So we are cramming them with skills. And for those of you who are here, I know that you're going to go home tonight and finish your homework. That laugh was like, no, we're not gonna. So they do 8 months on a home campus. We have students from all over the world, 140 countries, who come to this campus for 8 months. And then for the other 3.5 months of their education, they go to any other campus in our system. So the people who are here in this room, many of them spent 8 months in San Francisco. Some of them just got off the plane yesterday from London or Dubai and are here now. And what they're studying isn't just Masters of Business Administration or Masters of Analytics or Masters of Entrepreneurship and Innovation. It is more importantly a global mindset. The problems that we face in our civilization, not just for business, in our civilization, ignore national boundaries. Climate change doesn't care about lines on a map. Social justice, lines on a map are irrelevant. So what they're doing in this building is not only creating interesting businesses, but they're also generating global social impact. It is wonderful, and it's a true honor for me and all of the rest and faculty and staff here at Hult to watch them as they do it. They inspire us as they do it, which means that I couldn't be more delighted to have GlobalSaké here with that same ethic, with the same goal, and with the same desire for making connections around the world for impact. Welcome. I hope you have a wonderful evening. Talia, thank you for coming.
So thank you so much for hosting us here, Ted. I used to teach here as well, so it feels like coming back home. So John and I founded GlobalSaké back in 2017. For those who don't know us, the mission of GlobalSaké is really to show knowledge sharing and collaborations across the different functions. So it's really bringing in leads who drive international efforts across the different functional parts of the organization. We typically, we used to always have events in person. Last year was all fully virtual, and then this year is a hybrid. So we can have, if you go to our website, you can see all the different things that we're going to do, that we're doing this year. But we have quarterly virtual events, and then we have the physical events. We have lock walks. Has anyone attended a lock walk Yay, quite a bit of you. Okay, great. So the first one was started in San Francisco, Fort Funston. And then we had in Madrid, in Colorado, in LA. The next upcoming ones are actually on July 7th in Berlin, well, actually London, and then July 10th, right before Lock World. It's going to be in Berlin. After that, Tel Aviv, Dublin, and so on. So this is, again, fostering the local communities, local food, and then we have live concerts in all of our international events. So they're very, very engaging. We have a mentorship program, so empowering the next generation of global leaders, again, to open the prism wide and think about all the many different aspects of the organization in driving international, and not seeing, international efforts as a sort of a tail end production language effort, narrower spectrum, but seeing it as more as an upfront strategic effort, lever for growth, to pull their companies into new markets. And if you're interested in learning more about the mentorship program, please just email us at info@globalsakegrowth.com or just reach out to me. We have now actually over 130, right? Mentees from campuses, from universities across the world. So the goal is to have mentors and mentees from every continent on the planet. We have some folks coming out of Cameroon, out of Ghana, and then across Europe. Again, studying computer science, studying not necessarily traditional localization tracks, but interested in an international career. And so we bring them here.
First of all, thank you to our sponsors, right? Like these kinds of things are not possible without the help of our sponsors that join us, many of whom have been with us for many years. And so you can thank them for all the deliciousness that we have going on, the fun capoeira that we'll be doing. I imagine a lot of you will be taking your shoes off and trying that out. But I'm going to quickly just let me just quickly run through these. I know that we're running a little bit behind, but it's important. So we're going to be kicking it off today with a keynote by Sylvia from Lilt. And then we're going to have an awesome panel discussion that's moderated by John Herzig from XTM. He just waved, so if you saw him wave, that's the guy to talk to. Then we have the cultural performance sponsor, Mother Tongue. And yeah, as I said, capoeira. I've never done capoeira, so we'll see how that goes if I jump in there. Just to be clear, I sprained my ankle a month ago, so.
Capoeira joint in San Francisco. So yeah, this is part. In the past we did taiko drumming. We try to bring we bring cultural experiences to all of our events. So that's part of it.
Exactly. Who's here from RWS also? All right. They like sake. So thank them for the sake tonight. We have some great exhibitions. Please stop by. If you stop by all three, we're going to be doing a giveaway. I'm going to keep track of the people, and we're going to do a couple of giveaways throughout the night for those awesome GlobalSaké sake boxes. So that's to help us not have to bring them home. So thank you, everybody. Stop by and say hi to Nimsi, Mother Tongue, and Lilt. Adobe, they took care of our food for us tonight. So yes, we do have some Adobe folks here tonight. They might not be here quite yet. I don't see them yet, but I'll point them out when they're here so you can kind of bombard them. Of course, thank you again to our venue sponsor, Hult. And then also, we have a lot of great sponsors just throughout the year. So we just want to kind of shout out to everybody who supports us throughout the year. It's been an interesting couple of years, as you all know. We've pivoted, we've done a lot of fun things. And so we appreciate that everybody believes in all the fun activities and experiences that we've thought of. Please, this is an actual opportunity to post stuff from an in-person event. So if you hear something that you like, if you see something that you like, please post it, tag us. We'll share, engage, and do all the fun stuff.
And by the way, this is the QR code for our LinkedIn group. So a lot of insights are shared there. So if you're not already on the LinkedIn group, join there.
Okay. Perfect. So this is really fun. It's my first in-person event since 2019, I think. And what's really cool is I got to see some people that I haven't seen that I worked with years ago. Actually, John, who's hosting the panel right after me, we used to work together, but it's probably been like 10 years since we saw each other. So that was really fun. First, a few fun facts about sake. One is the alcohol content of sake is higher than both beer and wine, which is really good because I only had 2 of them. But if you want to find me after, I'll be in the back. And number 2 is it is a lot more like beer than it is like wine, which I also didn't know. So thank you to Eva for curating my sake fun facts in advance of this, this presentation. Okay, so we have about 20 minutes together. Here's some of the things that we're going to talk about. So the fact that digital first, we are in a digital first global era, bridges for connectivity, the state of global experience in 2022. I'll explain to those of you who aren't familiar with what that is, some of the research that Lilt runs, how we can make some of this reality in a few case studies. And one of them is actually here in person that we'll get to hear from a little bit. So a little bit about me. I have spent 12 years in localization. I took a little hiatus and I went to AI search and platform for a few years. And then this industry welcomed me back with open arms. My fun fact is that during COVID, I used to not be an animal person. I got a dog. I became obsessed with that dog. I wrote a book about that dog, and then I published it on Amazon. So if anyone wants to support the puppy with no name, all the proceeds go to the Animal Humane Society that we adopted my sweet boy Alan from. So fun. It was a weird time. Okay, for those of you that have your phones, luckily, I think most of us can get up front. We're gonna do a little poll. If all of you can zoom in on this QR code, we're obviously talking about digital experience. And the question is, which touch points are most impactful for your organization when you think about global experience? So if everybody could zoom in on this QR code and participate, we're actually gonna pull the results live in a couple of slides. If you haven't raised your phone, I'll probably see it. So, okay, cool. All right, in the meantime, so McKinsey just recently ran a study where they found that over the course of the last 3 years, the customer experience has become 3 times more focused on digital experience. Obviously, COVID had a big part of this. I don't know that many of us would be surprised by this number, but it has tripled. So in other words, the customer experience today is digital first. And so when we think about what digital first is, Forrester went a second step, and Forrester did a study, and I'm going to read this because it is a tongue twister. So the Forrester Customer Experience Index, something I recently learned about, measures the impact of a brand's customer loyalty based on their digital experience. And for those of you that are in brand or that are marketers, they have found that if you execute this well, there's very clear and conclusive evidence that when done appropriately, you will have significantly higher growth, significantly higher retention of your customers. The opportunity for product cross-sell and upsell becomes much easier, and the acquisition volume of those customers becomes a lot faster. So again, I don't think that necessarily any of this is a surprise, but the fact that renowned institutions have gone out to find proof points for us to validate this assumption, I think is pretty telling. Okay, so when we think about the different touch points in a customer journey, so we understand that it's important, we understand that digital first matters. What does that journey for most of our customers look like? So when we at Lilt think about the customer experience or the global experience, is if you disconnect the customer experience, you unequivocally can't have a global experience for that customer. And there's numerous different touch points from when someone becomes a prospect to a customer in that experience. So maybe with awareness, it starts with ads that they're being fed on Facebook or LinkedIn or just about every other channel that still exists. Then they're considering what this brand relative to other brands looks like, and they're doing this on numerous different platforms. It can be Google, it can be Shopify, it can be just about anything. They go through to purchase, and then of course, then you want to retain the customer. And there's a number of different systems that exist with each of these. So with retention, we're thinking about things like customer support. With purchase, we're thinking about points of sale like Shopify or the CMSs that exist on Adobe, for instance. So imagine there's all of these touch points that exist, and how do we ensure that that experience looks as cohesive as possible so you can recognize what Forrester has already told us is really important. Okay, so for those of you who don't know Lilt, our CEO, Spence, he's a great boss. This is being recorded, so that's great. So he's a researcher and a scientist by training. So we as a company do a tremendous amount of research, both in engineering and AI, as well as into research to what this industry cares about. So we have a report that we run every single year. For those of you in this industry, you've probably seen it on LinkedIn and participated in some capacity. And when we ran the question that I asked at the beginning of this presentation, which was which touch points are the most impactful, these were the results that the survey found. Now, I'd be curious to see how this lines up with the results that you all provided. Help me out, Han. Who did the QR code? Raise your hand. Oh, no. Oh, what a slow load time. Okay, it's coming in. All right, we got results pending. Let's give it a few more seconds for those of you who tried. Oh, this is fun. Real time changes. Okay. All right, keep submitting, guys. Oh, okay. I was actually expecting the results to be very different, but they are alarmingly similar. So our research found that customer support and website are obviously a top 10. And those of you in this room said, 40% of you said customer support, and 28%, which is the next highest, said website. And then what I really love is blog and content came in as our third highest here, whereas when we ran the study, it came in a little bit lower than that. So our first 3 points have been validated, which is pretty great. You guys had social media really high too. Looks like our research isn't so bad, I suppose, based on this small sample group. Okay, so the other thing that we found when we ran the survey was that 91% believe that the localization impacts the customer experience. So a disjointed customer experience means there is a disjointed local language and localization problem. This was probably the most conclusive statistic that we had in that entire study. The other thing that we ran was the percentage of teams that believed that they participated in managing a global experience. So what you can see here is every function believes that in some part they contribute to the global experience. What I found being in this industry for 12 years that was pretty surprising is that localization teams only reported 15, and I can't think of a function that more cohesively represents global experience considering everything that it touches. And I think that's one of the disconnects that we're trying to solve for. And one of the things that Lilt is really advocating for is, as an industry and as the service that we solve for within our specific organizations, this is by far one of the most important. We see all of the different touch points. We translate the interfaces that our customers work in. We translate the websites that our customers work in. All of these lead to a better cohesive customer experience. So if we all agree that global experience touches every function, and if we all agree that a good global experience means that you will have a better customer experience, better retention, higher growth, why is it that change has felt really hard? So this graph was actually first taught to me when I actually left the industry for a little bit. And it's called the curve of emerging technology. I call it the curve of disillusionment. And really what it says is that whenever we think about new technology, whenever we think about innovating something, there's always a hype trend that goes up. So everyone's really excited. And I think we saw this with MT maybe 10 years ago, where everyone was really excited about it. Everybody was pumped that it was, you know, I think it was the CEO of Microsoft that was on a stage like 15 years ago and said, 2 years from now, there will be no more human intervention. Like everything's going to be done by these computers and these machines. And like, here we are 12 years later. And there was this peak, it came down. And then when the disappointment of these new technologies, and this applies to every technology, not just our industry, people become really disappointed because like the hype wasn't worth the output. And then little by little, we start actually see the productivity gains of some of those new technologies as new players come into the space, the technology gets innovated. We just see innovation within that specific new set of research. And then you reach this plateau of productivity where we end up much higher than where we started, but typically everything kind of dips for a little bit. But there is a way. We've been through the trough of disillusionment before. There is a way to start making global experience a reality. And so when we think about talking to our customers at Lilt and how we can better empower them to tell their stories and make a case for global experience within their functions, in as much as like we can read this, like we like to give very tactical advice. So if you are going through your experience and you find a piece that's disjointed, answering questions like, what is the content that you need translated and how much of it isn't translated yet? What are the systems of connectivity that all of that lives in, and how can you facilitate that content coming in and out really easily? What are the costs associated with it? When I was at Yext before which is nothing, my 3-year breakout from localization, they used to talk about the fact that the reason so much of this AI has come on the market is because the volume of content has been increasing so significantly that marketers can't keep up with it. Industries can't keep up with it because content is now being written by AI, content is being written by expansive teams, and customers expect that they can self-serve 90% of the things that you have. And so the experience that was once nicely controlled in websites that were built has become really disjointed. So someone may buy a product in Spanish, but they can't be serviced in Spanish. And that can create for a really frustrating experience. So where Lilt comes into the picture is we really believe in a seamless way of managing localization processes that does not require the need to learn complicated new systems. And this applies across the board. So if your support content lives in Zendesk, we can plug into Zendesk. If you are a sophisticated localization program with a TMS supplier, we plug into the TMS suppliers. In fact, XTM is a great partner of ours, shameless plug. So when we look at Lilt, there's really 3 components for it. So of course, we will act as a service provider and translate your content. We can also connect to any points of entry. And we really believe that if we can take the change management and that trough of disillusionment away from our buyers, we will have much higher adherence in the global experience journey because there won't be the need to learn complicated new systems across the board. So as you can see here, we have a wide range of connectors that we work through. You can see that again, we also connect to a number of different TMS systems. Really, as far as the way that we participate is a path of least resistance. Wherever your content lives, no problem. And some of our best case studies, we have Loic here from Intel. Intel was a very early adopter, and actually, if we can, where's the microphone? Can someone take this back to Loic for me? Loic, raise your hand, Loic. There we are, there's Loic from Intel. Yeah, he did, he doesn't look the same. I think like 90% of the people in this room have commented on this already. So Loic was an early adopter of Lilt, which means he was also an early adopter of this new translation methodology that we employ. And I would love to take a few minutes for you to tell the group, being an early adopter is really difficult in some cases. How did you navigate convincing a really large group of people that you wanted to try something new?
What a good question. So we effectively did have quite a lot of pushback initially from a series of stakeholders. I mean, one of them had come to visit Lilt in San Francisco, and when we came back was like, oh, no, small companies, they work out of a warehouse or a garage. Well, like, yeah, I know of the companies.
Our original office was not great.
Started in a garage and they have done pretty well, so maybe it's not that bad. But at the end, we did our due diligence. We basically needed to convince all of the stakeholders with accurate data, objective data. So we did a lot of, proof of concept with you, running content through Lilt, through our other vendors, and, pushing it on the web with some A/B testing and measuring how is the reaction from the users to these pieces of content, with the, statistically valid kind of sample, quite a few pages, quite a few languages to effectively compare, okay, do we get the difference in time on page, in click-through rates, stuff like that, scroll through. And if everything is pretty much the same, then we don't take an extra risk by, going with Lilt. Then I think one was really helpful for us was that your solution, the adaptive empty that you guys have, not only from my perspective is much more elegant conceptually than empty and post editing. So I think that's much nicer for the translators, for the experience of the translators, but it also runs on Intel processors. And that was one of the few actually empty use cases that was running on Intel, Xeon processors instead of running on GPUs from one of our competitors. And I was like, if we don't, support them, that's really lame. That's the one empty supplier that runs on our processors. We should try to work with them and try to convince our, marketing people, hey, this is the best use case we have in the industry. And if we're not using it, what does that tell to our other customers? And so all of those, the price point, I'm somewhat sad that this is a quote that remains everywhere and that everybody kind of goes to, because yes, that was good, because that helped me translate twice as much volume for the same budget. And I totally love that. But that's really not what was the most significant for me. The experience for the translators with adaptive MT being a little bit, for me, more elegant conceptually. The fact that you run on our technology, the fact that we could translate more content faster, the fact that we could eliminate the need to constantly train MT engines because our MT engine were trained by our translators as they kept using them. All of that was really cool. And at the end, it kind of makes sense. We presented this to our management. They say, okay, Loic, your decision is yours. Okay, then the decision is made.
Well, we appreciate the
and
risk.
Then 3 years later, I have to live with it, and I have not been fired yet, so I guess it's okay.
Yes, it's been 2.5 years. That's right. So what was the tagline that we had come up with? Lilt translates for Intel, Intel powers Lilt. with the processors. Loic will also be on the next panel, so you guys can ask him more questions if you want. Okay, so planning ahead, just again, some more tactical numbers. So 4 to 9% will look to increase the volume of localized content. That's not slowing down anywhere. We already see a major shift, especially in the macroeconomic climate that has developed within the last, let's say, like month or so. We are seeing quite a significant shift towards strategy that is more focused on the holistic global experience, as well as looking for efficiencies and processes. The number of languages that are being supported on a global basis is, again, our customers are coming to us and looking for expansion in this capacity and making sure that we're investing in technology that is scalable and backed by research, and significant engineering manpower is going to be hypercritical. And that's a wrap.
John, are you ready, sir? All right, here he comes. We have Adam here. Loic. Yep. All right.
Okay, so we've got 2 mics to share between the 4 of us. Can everybody hear okay? All right, fantastic. So first of all, I just wanted to introduce myself really quickly. My name is John Herzig, and I run the sales and client service organization for XTM in North America. And I'm really excited and super grateful to be here and be invited by GlobalSaké to moderate this panel. So in kind of preparation for it, I tried to channel my inner Oprah to keep things moving. So if you look under your chairs, there's a car for you. No, I'm just kidding. So, but really, so the real stars of the show are the panelists that are gathered here today. And it's just an honor to be sharing the stage with them. So we've got, so out of order, but so I'll start at the end. We've got Adam Bittlingmayer, who is the co-founder and CEO of ModelFront. And if you haven't heard of ModelFront, he'll tell you a little bit about what that is. We have Pia Bresnan, who runs localization for Uber. And if you haven't heard of Uber, this might not be the right forum for you. And then we've got Loic Dufresne de Virel, thank you, who runs I took French. Took French in high school, and who runs localization for Intel. So first of all, thank you all for joining, and thanks again to GlobalSaké for having us. So when we were sitting down and kind of getting ready for today, the central theme of what we were talking about is how organizations are making products more accessible to more people and expanding their global reach using both kind of today's localization technology and the technology of tomorrow. And one of the things that we kind of stumbled upon as we were discussing is that there are a lot of organizations out there who are building on technologies that have previously existed, but going out and reaching more people and driving innovation, essentially by standing on the shoulders of giants, right? And I think that was Loic's contribution to our prep session. So I thought I'd start with him. And so can you expand on that, Loic, and tell us a little bit more about your vision of how technologies are building on each other to create new use cases and reach more people with more stuff?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, John. So I want to guess that you guys have heard of Intel. You know, you might not know Uber or Model Front, but that's okay. Use them to go back home. Use Uber to go back home after you have, tested all of the sake in the back. So I'm going to go back with the fact that the company I work for, the purpose that we have is to, create world-changing technology that enriches the life of everybody on the planet. And that's a big, big, big purpose. Okay, that's massive. And when I put together world-changing and life of every person on the planet, I always tell to my stakeholders internally, and there is nothing at the end of that with an asterisk that says, assuming you speak English. Okay, so all of our technology, you might be exposed to it no matter what language you speak. So of course, we're going to localize some of the content, but we don't localize in that many languages. But what is more important for me, besides the commercial aspect of my team localizing content for Intel and helping our marketing and sales guy, close a deal, is having that just hardware, software, technologies, building blocks being made available for anybody else to build something with that, and it could be anything. I mean, I have one of my colleagues is currently working on, combining 3D cameras with AI to build a translator for, sign language. That's great. That's not something that I will do in localization, but I totally support that kind of effort. We have examples where you can, with edge computing and 5G, where you can do a lot more, manufacturing, like, quality checks and things like that directly on the floor without having the latency that you would get if you go back to the cloud and the server. So that's technologies that actually change the way people can do their work. When we use a drone to go over, electrical lines or pipelines and to do quality checks, that's stuff that we couldn't do years back, but you combine cameras, image recognition, GPS, all of this comes together and helps you have a much better technology. And then I would say, going to localization, as we do more work to develop, processors and methods that will help us improve the quality of our language models, when we go to MT. And we're going to see that we have ways to train MT engine that are, using like parse models with few data for some of the languages that commercially we will not probably look at supporting, but suddenly that becomes possible. And then you combine this with, speech recognition and text to speech, and suddenly you can make information available to people who maybe can't read, or people who speak a language that doesn't have a script and are completely absent from the internet because they cannot access this.
You stole my thunder for like 2 questions from now.
Sorry, I didn't read the. But this is for me where, having access to all of those technologies and having an ecosystem of partners, of inventors, device manufacturer, and working with telcos and all of this large, ecosystem of partners makes a difference. And it is really cool. So that's what kind of, gets me up in the morning. And I mean, I'm not going to the office yet, but I still get up.
So thank you, Loic. No, that's awesome, because making things accessible to more people worldwide, and we will talk about accessibility as a question not only of localization, but also to potentially people who don't or haven't learned to read and write, and how are we making technology and progress available to those populations as well. And so I think that's a really maybe cool segue into Uber. So Pia, I know when we got ready for this, we talked about some of Uber's expansion into other parts of the world, in Africa and India, where maybe it was kind of an internet first approach here in North America when Uber was first coming out, but there were different approaches, sort of meeting people where they were with technology to get the platform out to the highest number of people. So could maybe tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So when Uber first started, they had a strategy of hyper growth. And basically their approach was huge brushstrokes across the world, making the app available in, 70 languages. It was just a way to get the app out there, where into countries and societies who were utilizing mobile phones, and really working towards a strategy of hyper growth. Now, we know that the particular strategy, we've bumped up against several legal and compliance issues. So little by little, we've had to come into agreements with the local governments. In the aspects of the localization team, though, one of the values that we really want to address, that is a core fundamental value for Uber, is providing our users with magical experience. So for the last couple of years, we're reevaluating the experiences that we're giving our users and really looking at, on a granular level, is this experience that we're providing, which is a global in nature, is this hyper localized enough? Now, when you look at countries like in the United States or France or Germany, EMEA, our global strategy works fairly well. But when you look at countries like India and countries in Africa, Kenya, Nigeria, even the North Middle Eastern regions, these experiences are too westernized. So let's think about what can we do on the localization front in order to help these people be more engaged on the platform and really address our core value, which is providing these users with magical experiences. One big example that we assumed, we looked at, for example, some data in India, and we said, obviously English and Hindi are just way too academic. Well, Hindi in any way is way too academic for the majority of our earners. If you look at the socioeconomic distribution of our earners, they're not necessarily literate, and they're not necessarily adept in, the Hindi side of the translation of the English, American English at that. So that was really difficult for us to address. And the local team said, okay, well, let's just localize this into the five main India languages. Having done that, however, was not a solution to the problem, because guess what? How are you going to say hoy en día? This is Spanish. To date, though, not many of our users have transferred over from the English using the app into their local language. Now, that's a very interesting problem to have, and one that we're doubling down and really trying to understand, why aren't our Indic users switching over their app? Now, this is a huge economic potential here, and this is a problem that we're trying to address. We also understand that the majority of earners or onboarding utilize Android, utilize WhatsApp, and a lot of the strategies that we have here in the United States and in the sort of the westernized countries is very iOS based. So chatbot is very big. One of the ideas that we have is, are these people utilizing screen readers to translate the text that is in their app in Uber? We don't know. We're going to look at that information. And if not, maybe we do speech to text chatbot to help these guys or these users utilize the app, especially on the earner side, but also on the rider side. and we don't have, and that's example for India, for example, but it's really about looking at the country by country data on a very granular level these days and understanding who are our users. Let's take Poland, for example. You would think that the majority of the Polish users are in Poland. I mean, the users in Poland are Polish, but as a matter of fact, they're Russian. Now, when you look at if you're not utilizing the app in Polish and the fallback language is either Russian or something else, are we creating some geopolitical stress there? And so it's looking at the number 2 language is Polish, the number 3 language is Georgian, and number 4 is Ukrainian. So can we provide that magical experience to these users in Poland by maybe a language that we haven't added yet is Georgian, and provide that economic impulse for Uber? Yes. So it's really looking at that on a granular level these days. So what we really, really like to call hyper-localization.
And you've got that really interesting dual challenge of creating a magical experience, both for your earners and for your riders. And the language experience might be completely different for those two populations, right? So we're going to pass the mic on down to Adam. Poor Adam's been waiting for his moment in the sun. I'm going to ask a question, but before I'll ask the question, and maybe right before you answer, for those of you in the audience who aren't familiar with ModelFront, Adam will share a couple of words about what ModelFront is and what ModelFront does. But Sylvia brought up a great point, and it was a recent theme that we also had at XTM Live about a month or so ago as we gathered customers and prospects to talk about localization, is this idea of the explosion of content, right? There's too much content out there. And what we now know is that there's more content being generated than there are linguists to actually, qualified linguists to actually be able to translate it into all the languages where either end users or earners need it. So machine translation then becomes particularly useful in that equation of reaching larger numbers of people and translating larger amounts of content. But MT is not without its risks and trade-offs. So maybe that's the perfect segue for you, Adam, is how can global organizations both have it both ways, deploy MT and mitigate the risk associated with deploying machine translation?
Well, I used to work on the Google Chrome, Google Translate integration with Sylvia's CEO and CTO, right, back at Google. And I mean, essentially what happened was that, 4 billion people at this point got free access to machine translation, right? Via these kind of the integrations in Facebook, integrations in Google search, etc. So crappy translation is now free for most of humanity. And it provides a lot of value for people, right? Because the fact is, in the localization industry, in the translation industry, they like to hem and haw, but the alternative to translate to is no access, right? For most people, for most content. 4 billion people don't speak English. And so we have to do something scalable. At the same time, I recognize that you can't just tell somebody, right? I studied computer science, machine learning, et cetera. You can't tell somebody, oh, you don't need to learn English. You can just use the Google Chrome translation and read those machine learning courses and be up on this stage right now with the Google Translate app translating. It doesn't work like that, right? So for high value content, for quality content, you need quality translation, right? And so the question is, okay, how can we do that, right? Today, do you guys know what is the main way that that content is translated? It's with something called post-editing, right? So first they machine translate, and then when you meet somebody who says, I'm a professional human translator, not all the time, but most of the time, what they mean is, I fix machine translations. Yep. And the interesting thing is, over the last 10 years, right, when you have content, it gets split into sentences, something called a segment, right? And what percentage of those segments are they editing versus just touching? That is, what percentage of the machine translations are being left untouched by professional human translators? And it depends on the content type, it depends on the language pair, right? But it's gone from, let's say roughly something like 20% to 50%. We've seen as high as 90% of the machine translations are being left untouched in professional post-editing workflows. So a bunch of smart companies or smart people at smart companies like Amazon, Microsoft, VMware, they said, could we predict which of those segments, which of those machine translations are good and not send them to humans? Like a translation memory match, if you're familiar with that. And it turns out that they could, and I don't, I know I'm supposed to be the AI guy here. I don't like to speculate about the future, but this happened 5 years ago. Right? So for half a decade, the early adopters have been doing this. They built it in-house. They just don't give it to anybody else. Not because they're bad people, but they're busy, right? And a research project, an internal research project is not a product. So I really liked what Pia said before we talked, and Loic mentioned it too, right? Building blocks, right? So what became possible over the last 5 years is the building blocks for machine learning just became radically better, so that two guys in a garage over 6 months could, the right two guys, right, could launch a API that supported 100 languages, 10,000 language pairs out of the box to provide this same technology to all the other players, to a lot more players, kind of like the Google Translate API, so that it gets in everybody's hands. And so in the cloud, you get a key, get some free characters, you can put in a credit card if you like it, right? And now companies are using this to translate their content up to 4 times faster and cheaper with the same quality as they had before, right? And what does it mean 4 times faster and cheaper? In the end, it means that they will translate actually 4 times more.
So yeah, I mean, I think that's really interesting, because what we're talking about is translating content that was previously inaccessible because it was too costly to put it through human translation. It was too time consuming to put it through human translation. So now we've got solutions to create it. But it seems it seems kind of like a shitty trade-off to say, like, you can either have it in English or you can have a crappy translation, right? So it's really good that we've got, people like you and other machine translation providers working to improve things along the way, because that shouldn't be the trade-off, right? Just because you don't speak English doesn't mean you should still have a magical experience, right? To quote Pia. So a little bit earlier in the conversation, Loic touched on the really interesting point, I thought, of inclusivity and accessibility. And we think about it in our localization world. For a long time, we've been thinking about that from the standpoint of, is the content translated for enough people to be able to read it? And now we're thinking about these things a little more broadly, a lot more broadly. What about populations who have, for whatever reason, have never had the opportunity to learn to read or write in their own native language? How are we making things accessible to all of these people and being able to deliver magical experiences there? So maybe I'll go Loic and then Pia. How, when we're optimizing for users of all abilities, how does Intel, how does Uber take this into account? In the hot seat.
In the hot seat, no. So I'm going to start with, let's say, a subset of languages that is the more commercial, 20 languages that most people might speak, and with which you might reach, I don't know, 90+% of the people on the internet. What we have seen over the past 2 years is that accessibility and localization have totally collided, because we started having a ton of meetings and events that were online, and I have seen people suddenly come to me and say, Loic, we need translated captions. And okay, real time, yes, okay. Huh. And we had to figure out how do we provide this. But okay, do you have English captions for me to start from? No, we just have a speaker. All right, then I need to find a way that I can process your speech with a speech engine, a recognition engine, and then I can machine translate it and I can send it back to the user, either as text or as audio. And so this is actually possible today, and it works relatively well. What we found is that all of the systems that we have used always run with the same problems, meaning that because we have a very specific lingo at Intel, they make mistakes, the same mistakes with some of our key terms, and those are sometimes way, way embarrassing. And so we need to work with the provider of the speech recognition engine to train their engine. We need to work with the machine translation engine to also customize them. And that means a lot of work that comes to adding to the team. So can we expand that to more languages? Probably. I mean, that's not something that Intel is going to do, but we are providing some of the building blocks for people to do this, some of the software and processors, and then we're counting on people like Adam to come up with some extra solution or some. Who are the language weaver people in the room here? I mean, AWS, doing some MT as well. So there are multiple solutions. Small companies. I mean, we have been working with a small company called Wordly. That's really fun actually, and then what they do is really impressive in terms of speech recognition, machine translation, and then text to speech, and you can have your single audio on your smartphone. When you're even in a conference, you could be here in this event today and not speak English, and hear a translation of what I'm saying, actually spoken, an interpretation in Japanese or Chinese. Wordly. Wordly.ai. Yeah.
Everybody's M&A department is suddenly like writing down.
No, but there is a few like this, but this is one of them I know because their CTO is a former colleague from Intel and a good friend, so I know about them. But it's amazing the kind of stuff that those guys can do. And those abilities, those skills exist effectively, as you mentioned, 2 guys in a garage, all right, guys, but smart people exist everywhere. You give them the right tools, and they're going to come up with a solution to a problem. I mean, if I want to effectively translate more content with MT, I know that for going to what Sylvia was mentioning about, the global experience, if you navigate through your website and social media and you get emails from the company, and sometimes it's in French, and the next time it's in English, and then as you navigate through, suddenly it's like in English and French, the experience is crappy. So for me, we should provide consistent experience. If you are a known user or customer of Intel and you have told us somewhere that my language is French, we should engage with you in French. We should land on a French page, we should receive an email in French, you should come to an event, and if you don't speak English, you should have the French captions available, and it should be almost by default. It's a little bit creepy because you say, how do you know so much about me? But we can certainly support this kind of experience, but we need to translate everything. If I don't have the budget to do it, I'm going to have to use MT. But then the challenge is not with our stakeholders, but MT quality is bad. All right, then we're going to work with a guy like Adam to say, hey, can we eliminate the risk of a really, really bad translation with MT? So at least we give a acceptable, good experience at 95%. Still better than what the person will get if they will, just go to Google and translate online, because we control the MT engine, we control a little bit of, we have leverage, we have terminology, and all of that will help provide a much better quality still for the end user. It's better than nothing. It's better than just English. And the challenge is, can we repeat that and scale it across 100, 200 languages? I mean, doing it for the 20, 25, 40 commercial languages, it's a no-brainer. There is a lot of data available, a lot of people working on this. How can we make this possible and build models that people can easily port to? I'm going to do, I don't know, Cherokee or Inuit or any other language that will qualify as exotic, that I would never invest money to translate into that language. Company like Apple or Microsoft might want to do it, Uber might want to do it, but we support 15 to 40 languages at Intel, and that's well enough for us and what we need. But I'm sure that people will come up with way more of those languages. So go for it.
So let's pass it over to Pia. If we stay on that theme of accessibility for a moment, right? I think both from an earner standpoint and from a user standpoint, there are probably people out there using the Uber platform who may or may not read or write.
Yeah.
So how does Uber address this to make everything accessible?
Yeah. So really the Uber users span across the entire socioeconomic spectrum. So you have literate as well as illiterate people. The other thing about accessibility is the languages that we want to provide our users are in the long tail of languages, the ones that really don't have a well-trained engine. So it's well and easy having our app emptied and maybe even post-edited, but in some cases, really that isn't worth it because there's not that many users, but we want to make them accessible. But I want to go back to the problem that we have in India, which is the one that we're trying to address now. If they're illiterate and they can't read the huge amounts of text that we have in our app, what do we do then? And so there's something that we need to, this is something that we're trying to address right now is, can we make a hyper-localized experience for these users who are in this particular spectrum of literacy? And you guys have all shopped at IKEA, you've all installed your cabinets, and you all see that every single one of those instructions are images. Now, more and more then, we have to go to how we're gonna enable our users to be able to be engaged more and more in the app and create those magical experiences if they can't read. So it's turning into hyper-localizing the UI, hyper-localizing the content into having more images and call to action buttons and moving buttons. So that's how we're going to be able to engage these users who don't have the ability to read as much. There is a huge caveat, however, because we're tied with a ton of legal and compliance, and we need to have authorization and sign off and NDAs and all sorts of shenanigans. So that's still a challenge, but we're going to be able to employ the speech to text and confirmation with voice technologies. And that's where I think there's huge opportunity to unlock economic potential in the countries where we know that the literacy level is fairly low.
Awesome, thanks. So hold on to the mic for a second,
geez.
because we're going to wrap it up. We've got our lightning round, 30 seconds each.
30 seconds.
30 seconds each. Inside of a large global organization, where should the localization department or the language accessibility department sit?
Inside
30 seconds.
Inside of localization itself?
Where should localization sit inside the organization? Is it under marketing? Is it under where?
So we have something called core services.
Okay.
We touch upon every single piece of the organization, and so that's where we live. It's under what we call global scaled solutions, and that's where we are.
Where should it be, and why?
I think it's for us.
Is
it's
it in
perfect.
the right place?
It's for us. It's perfect.
Excellent. Loic? Oh, sorry. Oh, Adam.
So no, so I don't know. I've been in IT for 22 years. It's a little bit of an exception, I guess, but we actually right now renamed ourselves as like shared services and data. So I guess it goes back to what Pia was saying.
All right.
We support everybody, and we're happy where we are. I think it doesn't really matter.
Fantastic.
It's all a question of building the relationship with all of your stakeholders, and then you can be in marketing, you can be in product, you can be in engineering, in IT. They come to you because they need help.
Perfect. Adam, any particular opinion there?
Well, we're supposed to be agnostic on this, but yeah, it tends to vary by different organizations, but there does seem to be a kind of trend where it's its own function.
Awesome. So that wraps, we went a little bit long, and I thank you, GlobalSaké, for letting us go a little. I was expecting like the Oscars music to start playing at some point, but you let us go a little bit long. So thank you very much. But we do have like maybe a couple of minutes for one or two questions for Loic, for Pia, for Adam. Any burning questions that anybody has that they would like to ask?
Hello, thank you for sharing all your valuable knowledge here. I have a comment and then a quick question as well. The comment about the Indian market, more than 70% of Indian population is not literate, and India was nowhere near digital payments 20 years ago, and now India does the most amount of digital payments. And how that is done is because, like how you said, with UI and logos, and it's just tap of buttons, images, that makes it more possible. Vegetable vendors are taking money over digital payments. That never happened in decades ever. So that was one comment I wanted to make, where you said, why were people not switching, is because the easy access is there in the images and all that stuff. And the question, either of you can answer, is how did you sort of get into this localization journey in your career? Because this, to me, sounded very interesting. I'd never heard of this before. The max I had gone was like, oh, we need to translate Fahrenheit and Celsius for people from different countries, not really looking into the languages and all that stuff. So either of you can answer, maybe just reflect a little bit on how did you get into it and what made you think about, oh, I want to make a career in this.
I have the mic, so I'll start. Actually, for me, it's a second career. I started out in telecom. After I had my kids, I said, oh, I speak 3 languages. What can I do? And so I started in English to French single language vendor. And after a few years there, I said, okay, I want to go a little bit more upstream. And then I was at a multilingual language vendor. And then I made a very deliberate decision to try to move over on what they call the buyer side, because I wanted to understand the quality at source problem, right? So that is moving into an organization that is creating the content, and who are the various stakeholders inside of an organization. And that's where I am right now. And I really love my upstream journey, and I hope to continue that.
Because Adam, you didn't fall into localization. Adam is a machine learning guy. Huh? So I honestly don't know. Yeah, I kind of know, but I'm a civil engineer initially. So my stuff is concrete and building dams or roads and stuff like this. And that has nothing to do with localization. But I happened to one day come to the US after a detour through Costa Rica, where I lived for 4 or 5 years. So I arrived here. I spoke French, and Spanish, and English. And in '99, there was something called the Y2K bug. And Intel was in dire need of translating a lot of content and putting a lot of stuff on the web to explain to people what to do with their device and you name it. And those, they were looking for people to test their website. And say, okay, do you know computer? You speak languages? We don't care about civil engineering. We don't care about your other degrees. That doesn't matter. We just want you for the fact that you speak French and you know computer. I started doing some testing, and then 22 years later, I'm still there, and now I'm running the show.
And in terms of accessibility, looking around the room, there's probably about at least 50% of the people who have no idea what Y2K is. But just saying, we're not going to dive into that. Right. Any other questions in the audience? Oh, we have one in the back. And while we're waiting for the mic to get back, please, I encourage everybody, if you're students, if you're not students, please connect with all of these people on LinkedIn. Stay in touch. They post really valuable content. They have lots of great insights, and it's a great way to kind of get a peek into the world of localization. So, questions?
Thank you so much for sharing. This is a really interesting topic. I actually work half in Spanish, half in English, and we work on localizing for our markets. So how do you see the future of localization going in terms of, now we're focusing on languages, like mentioned, you should be able to receive content wherever you go in your language. Do you see that happening? Because everyone learning English is kind of the way they've addressed it. Do you see that happening more, or more like pictures coming up, like type IKEA manuals?
Who wants that one? Sounds like a good one, maybe for Pia.
We are still creating a ton of content. And it's not just the app. It's across the entire organization. So just because we're going to have a very specialized, hyper-localized experience for some of these countries or these peoples, it doesn't mean that we're not going to continue doing localization, transcreation, and we really love to coin hyper-localization. So Yes, we do utilize MT because otherwise we couldn't get the amount of content that we couldn't go there. But we're really focused on making sure that we give our users a good experience, and we need to have linguists for that. So that's not going away. Anyone else?
So I think we're gonna keep translating a lot. We might change the way we translate. That's for sure. We might move from translating a 4-page PDF to instruct some, how you do something into a 2-minute video. And so it's no longer translating text, it's dubbing audio. We might go with images. We might go with still more text. We might go with MT. We might go with something completely different that I not even think of right now. We'll see. We're doing, ASL to English text or English audio, and we might do, I might have a signer who knows sign language in English communicating with a signer who knows sign language in French and have a conversation. I was at the airport the other day, and there was a guy next to me who had his phone right here, and he was talking to somebody. There was no audio at all. They were signing to each other. I found this fantastic. This kind of ability to do that level of communication today. We're going to see more of that. So how are we going to translate? Yeah, definitely. There is so much content that there is still a need for translation. How much of it can we automate with a good quality? We'll see. All of you here who work on MT, on speech recognition, on text-to-speech. How do you make text-to-speech actually not, blah, 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 but a little bit more lively? Okay. There are ways to make it work. So all of this, we're going to keep improving. The computing power is there, the 5G, all of these things will help us get there and improve the experience. I'm totally sure of that. What that's going to look like, I don't know. That's a much bigger crystal ball.
And guys, one of the things we're going to wrap up, and one of the things, just to your point, is that the technology has enabled us is that in the old days, 6 months ago or something, we had to, English was a pivot language, right? You had to go, Japanese into English and English into Bahasa Indonesian, right? Or source English into non-English target, right? But today we're able to skip the English piece and go multilingual into multilingual and into multi-dimensions, right? With voice synthesis, we don't need necessarily, so we can sample voices, sample data. We don't need big data for multilingual. And across all the many different applications and mediums, right? Audio, video, speech to text, text to text, and so on. Thank you so much for this very inspiring and thought-provoking panel. So we feed you, but we also need to make sure that your body moves so that you keep your well-being is maintained. And so we're going to make a sharp transition into the cultural part of the evening. We have a capoeira. Just follow the drums to the back and the left side of the space for the next one.
Step with your left leg back in Ginga, protect your face.